You know, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence like it just suddenly appeared in 2022. But what if I told you we've actually been building this digital brain for over 70 years? If you don't understand that journey, you're really missing the most important part of the story. So let's trace this whole evolution together.
So let me just ask you straight up. When do you think AI was invented? Go on, just take a second and think of a year. You got one in your head?
Okay, if you thought of a date somewhere around 2022, you are definitely not alone. The whole explosion of tools like ChatGPT put generative AI on the map. And for most of the world, that's pretty much when the clock started. But that's just the latest chapter in a much, much longer book. The real story is a 70-year evolution. It's this multi-decade quest to build intelligence outside of the human mind. And believe me, it unfolds in these really distinct ages, each with a completely different philosophy behind it.
So, let's start at the beginning. The first era, we'll call it the Age of Rules. This is where we thought of AI as basically a very, very powerful calculator.
This timeline right here, this is our roadmap for the whole journey. We kicked things off with basic research back in the 50s. Then we moved to these things called expert systems in the 80s, before a complete pivot to machine learning in the 2010s. And that, of course, led to today's generative AI. And it's all pointing toward a future of, well, superintelligence.
In those early days, AI was strictly a research project. The machines themselves, they had zero creativity, zero intuition. They were just tools that did exactly what a programmer told them to do, step by step. Nothing more, nothing less.
So by the 1980s, we tried to level up with something called expert systems. The whole idea was to, say, interview a human expert, like a doctor or an engineer, and then painstakingly code their entire decision-making process, all their logic, directly into a machine.
But here was the fatal flaw. These systems were incredibly brittle. They couldn't think or adapt in any meaningful way. If the AI ran into a situation that the programmer hadn't specifically predicted and coded for, it would just break. It had absolutely no ability to handle the unexpected.
That brittleness, it led to a total dead end, which forced a radical new approach. And that brings us to our second era, the age of learning. This is where we started treating AI not as a calculator, but as a student.
Okay, so this is the crucial pivot, right around the 2010s. We stopped trying to hand code every single rule of logic. Instead, we just gave the machine gigantic libraries of data, trillions of words, images, you name it, and we designed it to find the patterns all by itself. We stopped being the teacher with the answer key and became more like the librarian, just providing all the books.
And look, this isn't some abstract sci-fi concept. This is the tech that's already running in the background of your daily life. It's what powers that recommendation engine that somehow knows exactly what video you want to watch next. And it's the silent guardian in our cybersecurity systems, detecting threats by recognizing patterns of attack. This whole approach then evolved into what we now call deep learning. This is where we got way more sophisticated, using these complex, layered structures called neural networks that are literally designed to simulate and mimic the architecture of the human brain. And this was the critical step that laid the groundwork for the creative explosion that we're all seeing right now.
Which brings us right up to today and our third era, the age of creation. And here, the whole relationship changes again. We're moving from thinking of AI as a student to seeing it as a colleague.
This quote, wow, it really captures the sheer scale of this leap. I mean, think about it. We've journeyed from machines that could only follow simple, rigid instructions to systems that have a pretty startling level of creative and analytical power. It's a fundamental shift in what these things can do.
This new power is what we call generative AI. And its defining feature is that it doesn't just find or classify information that's already out there. It generates brand new, original content.
You can think about it this way. Traditional AI is kind of like a search engine. It finds the best existing answer. Generative AI, it's like an author. It writes a completely new story. That right there is the revolutionary difference.
And that completely changes our relationship with it, right? It's no longer just a passive tool we use, like a hammer. It's becoming an active partner in creation, a collaborator we can bounce ideas off of and actually work with to solve problems.
We're even starting to see the next phase of this kickoff, agentic AI. We're talking about systems that can reason, plan, and take autonomous actions to achieve a goal you give them. They don't just react to one prompt at a time. They create and execute an entire strategy.
So, where does this all lead?
Well, that brings us to the final and most speculative era on our map, the next frontier. And here the question gets a little more uncomfortable. Are we talking about AI as a successor?
This is the theoretical endpoint of the whole AI journey, artificial superintelligence, or ASI. The concept here is an AI so advanced that it could start improving itself, which would trigger this runaway cycle of intelligence growth that would pretty quickly and vastly surpass all human intellect.
Which leaves us with this one last huge question. Looking back on this whole 70-year evolution, from a simple calculator that follows rules, to a student that learns patterns, to a colleague that actually creates with us, what exactly are we building? A better tool? A new kind of colleague? Or something else entirely? That's the question that's going to define the next 70 years.